who are pretty disinterested in money. I really had a great time there, but I decided to leave the bank in 2012 and become self-employed. I think I saw that my marriage was heading for divorce, and I wanted to be able to be more flexible around the needs of my family. And so from 2012, I kind of called myself a financial fixer. And that evolved because quite a few clients followed me and said that they still wanted to work with me. But by then I was no longer authorized by the FCA. And so I had to find more creative ways of being able to help my clients navigate their finances, and sort of was a financial fixer, or a couple of them used to call me a freelance bank manager, which was quite amusing. Then in the pandemic, it turned out that financial coaching had turned into a thing. And when I read about financial coaching, it really resonated, because it felt like that had been the way I had been talking to clients about money for a long time. So essentially, as a financial coach, I believe that we can all achieve a good relationship with money so that our finances can support the life choices that matter most to us. Okay. Go on to the next slide. So what do I actually mean by financial well-being? Well, at its simplest, I think that financial well-being equals a good relationship with money. And if we have a good relationship with money, then I think it's much more likely that we're living a meaningful life. It's much more likely that we will be meeting our financial and life goals. If we have a good relationship with money, then perhaps we are better able to make more confident, informed choices about our financial decisions when we get to those crossroads and we need to make a financial decision. It probably means that we're happy to talk about money. We don't feel shame, we don't feel guilt. Perhaps we're much better able to talk amongst our friends about our own personal finances, something that was very much taboo within our parents' generation and perhaps has been passed down to us as well. Having a good relationship with money might mean that we have stronger personal relationships, therefore, because we are happy to talk and share information. And particularly relevant right now is that by having a good relationship with money, we might feel that we can manage stress better, that we feel more resilient within the context of the cost of living crisis, and feel much more in control when we're being bombarded by terrifying headlines every day. We have more resilience to deal with those headlines. And also for those of us who have relationships with younger people, perhaps if we have a good relationship with money, then we're better able to help our children form good lifetime money habits too. Okay. So at this point, at this early point of the presentation, I think it's good perhaps to do a bit of myth busting, and that whole myth around, does money make us happy? So in order to put some weight against this idea, I did a bit of research. And first of all, I came across this quote from Professor Tim Kasser from Knox College, which is a college in the States. So he suggests that money itself does not make us happy. It is how we use it that matters. The value of accumulating wealth for its own sake is in direct contradiction with happiness. I wonder how many of us have perhaps thought about that. If we take it a step further, I found this bit of research from the Harvard study on happiness, which states that the largest contributor to our well-being is the quality of our social relationships, which in theory should cost nothing. And then finally, as a bit of whimsy, perhaps at the end, I've got this comment from Charles Kingsley, who was a priest and a social reformer in the 19th century. And Charles wrote, "We act as though comfort and luxury were the chief requirements of life, when all that we need to make us happy is something to be enthusiastic about." I wonder what people think about that. Easy for Charles to say. All right. So let's start thinking about your relationship with money. And first of all, I wonder how many of you have actually thought about your relationship with money, actually taken time to properly think about your relationship with money. It's essentially, how did you get here? And I'd suggest that the sum of your experience plus the financial patterns of your childhood typically shape how we look at the world today. In the article which Diane referred to, which I wrote for the Noon website, I'd found a piece of research which suggested that our ideas about money are pretty much set by the time we're 7, as a result of the parental experience that we've had. What I want to suggest is that by developing our own self-awareness around money and our financial behaviours, we can begin to make new, healthier choices. So one of the games that we play, and this is the first time that it might be useful to have your pen and paper, is this idea, a game to play, which we call the If Money Came to Tea exercise. And when Eleanor wrote about it, I think she just updated it and said, if money knocked on your door. I think for those people who had When the Tiger Came to Tea books for their children, the whole coming to tea thing is perhaps a bit outdated or has a different metaphor that springs to mind. And so what I want you to think about for a minute, and just maybe sit back from your PC, that if money knocked on the door, or if money came to tea, how would it dress? How would it behave? And what would it say? So I'll just give you a minute to think about that. And if you feel like you want to share your thoughts in the chat box, well, that might be quite good fun. Diane, I've taken my eye off the chat box. And so if any of our audience put any answers in, it might be just fun or interesting to share what people might be saying.
Absolutely. Don't worry, I'll be keeping an eye on that. And just I'll take this opportunity to remind you that as Sasha's going on with her talk, any questions you have at all, please put those up in the chat too, because I'll be keeping an eye on that and we can get round to them later. But definitely do put your answers to this in the chat box. Be great to see.
Diane, I don't know if you feel like sharing what you thought when we played this game with you.
Oh, I knew you were going to put me on the spot. So bearing in mind what I said at the beginning, I think the way that money would behave, to me, is to be a bit scary and unapproachable. And I think money would be saying to me, yeah, what do you want? Yeah, can I help you? No, I don't think so. So that's how I feel. I'm not quite sure if I know how it would dress. I think it would just feel threatening to me.
So maybe in a dark cloak or something. Yeah.
I can see people are putting stuff up in the chat. Oh, neat, priggish and apologetic, Hilary. Great. Oh, businesslike. That's a really good one.
Mm-hmm.
Look at these. This is great. It would wear nice threads, quality fabric, all dressed in black. Oh, dressed fabulously. Nice. It would be well dressed and relaxed. I want to have that relationship with money, please. That one.
And I think talking to a female audience, it's quite interesting also to think about the gender of money and how many of us see it as a male personality versus a female personality. Although a couple of people, when I've asked them, have seen money as their mother or their headmistress or something, which is, yeah.
Oh, this is a lovely one. It would dress in black, behave nonchalantly, and would say, stop frittering. That's a good one, Claire. Thank you for that. And Karen says it would dress in a grey suit, but I would love it to be colourful and fun. It would behave seriously and bland, but I would love it to be silly and creative. And what would it say? Be careful. And I would love it to say, be free.
These are great answers. Brilliant.
Aren't they? This is wonderful. Oh, Jane says it would hang out conversationally, and she sees it as male. Whilst Fiona reckons that her money would be sharp and full of gusto, whilst Hazel said it would dress very posh, behave friendly, approachable, and very often, but sometimes pompous. And it would say, money can't buy you happiness, but it does buy you freedom.
That beeping.
Lovely,
That's
lovely. All right, so I'll move on, and thank you. I can come back to this later, but the purpose of the exercise is just to get you thinking about money, you know, just to kind of get the juices flowing a bit. And this is all to do with getting in tune with our own awareness about money and our awareness of our relationship with money. And so the next exercise that I want you to think about is just spending 2 or 3 minutes writing your money story. So money story is a term that we use in financial coaching. But before you do that, I'll just explain a little bit more about that. And to be helpful, I've just shared my own money story. So essentially what I mean by money story is sort of just a few headlines that you recollect through your life of when perhaps you first became aware of money, what money meant to you within your childhood, how that might have evolved during steps through your teenage life into adult life. So for me, if I just share this quickly, my early money memory is abundance. I recall that we lived in a big house, we had foreign holidays, it seemed that there were no problems around money at all. My parents seemed to have lots of parties all the time, proper 70s dinner parties, you know, that kind of thing. My brother and I hiding under the table in the dining room, listening to the adults. And then all of a sudden that switch, my dad's business fell into bankruptcy and my parents got divorced. And then the patterns around money changed into quite a sinister way, in that suddenly money was all about arguments, incessant arguments between my mum and dad about money and who was paying for what. And as I wrote in my article, I just remember from this time, my mum grounding into me the importance of being financially independent and not relying upon a man. She was so angry about the situation. And it's no surprise to me that I ended up in a career in finance because of that kind of debate around money at that time. But interestingly for me, I came from the north and I ended up at Coutts Private Bank, where my ideas about wealth and what people with money looked like really got turned on their head. And especially, I think, looking after an arts and creative community of people, I started learning much more about money and philanthropy and the positive effects of money, which was really lovely. Sort of simultaneous to this, I was having my own experience. I got married, I had children, and suddenly my marriage ended in divorce. And money for a time in my life just equaled anxiety. That's all it did. My ex turned out to be hopeless and not supportive at all, and it all fell upon me. And so for a while, I could just think of money and my heart would start racing all the time, because how was I going to afford the life that we wanted to try and live? And then post that, independent, single mum, money again on my terms, it sort of allowed me to reevaluate money. And perhaps through my financial coaching, I've sort of done a lot of healing with my own experience of money and my relationship with money. So I'd like you to maybe spend, perhaps I'll time 3 minutes, which feels like a lifetime when you're the speaker, but probably not when you're making notes. But just before you do that, we'll just look at the next slide, which is beginning to think about your emotional connections with money. And maybe I'll leave this slide up as you're writing your money story. And it's just prompting you with a few ideas around emotional connections to money. Did you feel rich or poor growing up? Were you conscious of a comparison with other families, with friends? What role did money play in your childhood? What are your happy money memories? What are your unhappy money memories? What did it feel like when you earned money for the first time? What are your biggest fears about money? And how do you think any of this impacts upon you now? So it's 22 minutes past. Maybe I'll give you 3 minutes, which I think will be long enough just to do some headlines. And we'll pick this up again in 3 minutes. So off you go. Anything that occurs to you, just get that down on a piece of paper. Okay, so that's about 3 minutes. If you're in full flow, just park it for now, but please revisit it. I think this is really good work to be doing. And I think from my experience, and perhaps you will see from the headlines that you've written down, it becomes so hard to extrapolate emotions and money. They are so interwoven with each other. And if we take this a step further, we actually have that phrase, don't we? Emotional spending. And this summarizes how so much of our spending behavior is triggered by the emotions that we are feeling at that particular time. Now, if I look at this list that I've put together in this table, you know, I can look at this and think, I've done all of those, and maybe some of them at the same time. But it's just worth revisiting, perhaps, that we can have a feeling, and then that evolves into a financial behavior, which may be occasionally positive, but quite often negative. And I think it's just useful to have the awareness of that and to talk about it. So if we're feeling happy, we might spend to celebrate. A lovely thing, and why not? If we're feeling sad, worried, or ashamed, we might spend just to make ourselves feel better. If we're feeling angry, we might spend to compensate for that feeling. If we're feeling guilty, then we might spend to cover up that guilt. I think the most common one I have there is if I think about mother's guilt and the times that I have spent money to just distract or divert the children because I felt guilty that I'd had to work, and you know, that was the result of that. I probably still do that, actually. I'm sure we all do. Bored. We spend because we're bored, something to do, distraction, just, you know, rather than go for a walk, it's perhaps easier to do something online, to shop, to, you know, to change the mood. And I think particularly as women, we would recognize those behaviors, because I think this is a sweeping generalization, and I know different people have looked into surveys on this, but we feel like we are more emotional, and therefore more of this behavior happens. Okay. So let's move on to talk about our money mindset. And what a financial coach means by money mindset is your unique set of beliefs and attitudes about money, conscious and unconscious. And all the work that we've done so far on this presentation, talking about if money came to tea, writing your money story, all of this feeds into your money mindset. And we might say a money mindset is positive, or a money mindset might be negative. So an example of positive money mindset would be money creates choice, or money is a bridge to freedom, and I can take charge of my finances. But if we're feeling negative, if we have a negative money mindset, then money could be boring, or I'm not good with money, or people with money are greedy. You know, we could think of lots more of these examples, positive and negative. And so I'm wondering how your money mindset is shaping how you feel right now. Just think about that for a minute. So if we think about money mindset, we also might think about self-limiting beliefs. We might want to have a positive money mindset, but there is a voice in our head holding us back. And the voice in our heads might be fostering, if we look at these bullet points, powerful thinking habits that keep you stuck doing things that don't serve you, or a feeling of certainty about what something means. That might be, I am bad with money. But this is just a belief, and it's not a fact. And we can shape this. We have the power to shape this ourselves. So what I want you to start thinking about is challenging a negative self-limiting belief and finding a louder voice in your head, which moves from being that glass half empty to that glass half full, and recognizing that perhaps you do have the power in order to be able to shape that. Okay. So to help us do that, I've got a list here of empowering money beliefs, beliefs that might move us from that negative towards the positive. And I wonder what you think of these statements. So the first statement I've got is money is as important in my life as health and relationships. Or money is neither good nor bad. It has no intrinsic meaning. I deserve to have financial security and I create the results in my life. This next one, I can increase my knowledge about money and finance. Well, of course you can. You're all here on this presentation, listening to ideas about money and emotions and how we can take charge of those. This next one, I'm wrestling with this myself. It's easier to make money than to spend it. It's an interesting idea, worth thinking about. And this one, which perhaps resonated with me when I was at Coots, I can be well off and a good person. For a lot of us, even the idea of having money creates a negative sentiment. We might have ideas about what rich people look like, and that might feel quite alien to us. And then the last one, which I love, but I'm trying to live for myself, is I am a money magnet. I wonder how many of us feel that. I hope some of us do, because there's a lot of positive energy coming from that statement. Okay, so it's time to take control. It's time for us to think about our financial goals, and it's time to take action. So the starting point of this is, what is the desired outcome? And for a lot of us, perhaps we haven't actually quantified this or thought about this. There's a lot of noise in our head, but what is the desired outcome? And when you've got so much noise in your head, quite often it's better to get that down on a piece of paper. We're not going to do it now, but maybe if you think about what the desired outcome might be, then you're taking steps in a right direction, in my opinion. And for those of us who struggle with numbers, and Diane, I'm thinking of you, maybe another thing to do is to draw what the desired outcome is. Stick men or colours, or when I was training as a financial coach, we watched a YouTube video of an American lady talking about visualize it, and there were fantastic drawings of what people were doing, and I've done this a bit with clients, which has been really good fun. So a good place to start is with the positive and what's actually working. And even if you're feeling really beat up about money, I think I would challenge you to think of something in your past which is kind of a money achievement. Now, that might have been saving pocket money when you were a child. It might have been buying a first car, or paying off a credit card debt, or confessing to your parents that you had a credit card debt, and sharing the responsibility of that. Or more recently, was it getting on the property ladder, or securing a pay rise or a bonus, or leaving employment and becoming self-employed? I'm sure if all of us look into our past, there will be things that we can find which demonstrated that we had got it, we nailed it, we were good with money. So start with the positive and use that momentum to drive your energy about changing the circumstances that you want to change now. Another useful thing to think of is, what can you actually control? You know, when we're being bombarded by headlines every day suggesting a very terrifying and anxiety-driven cost of living crisis, what is it that you can actually control? We can't control base rate, that's out of our hands, but we can control the things closer to home. We can think about where we're spending our money, or things to do with what is important to us in terms of that's an absolute necessity versus actually that's just a nice to have, and maybe I don't need to spend that money on that thing. How can I change things slightly that still work within my life, but are perhaps taking some of that stress and pressure and anxiety away from me? What is your motivation? Why are you doing this? I was thinking about Eleanor's tax return, and obviously her motivation there was not to fall foul of HMRC, but maybe another motivation of doing your tax return could be empowerment, could be, I've got this, I'm on top of this, I know I can do this, just a different way of looking at that perhaps. Another thing to do is to pay attention to your core values. And the idea here is, if we're acting in accordance with our core values, then it's much more likely that the decisions we're making will feel right and good, that we're doing something good. Now, occasionally I might mention this phrase to a client, and they've kind of lost touch with what their core values are. You know, when was the last time you actually thought about your core values? And for those people who feel a bit like they have lost touch with that, can go online, and there are lots of online spaces where you might get a list of values, and it's encouraging you to maybe choose 10 from a list and then maybe reduce those to 3. So have a bit of a look online and see what you can find about reminding yourself about your core values. We touched upon self-limiting beliefs, and I think it's useful to understand the things that are triggering you, the things that might knock you off track, or you know, people talk about the saboteur voice in your head. So get to understand those triggers and think about how you can manage them. Stop negative and unhelpful comparisons. This is about you. You know, there's that phrase, always keeping up with the Joneses. I touched upon in that emotional connection slide, you know, were you aware of comparisons to other people, other families? Try and switch that off. Try and just focus on you and what's happening in your life. And maybe even turn off the social media, which is knocking you off track. If you find the headlines depressing, then do what you can to avoid them. Slide 2 of sort of the same thing is explore your options. You know, there might be more than one way to get to the place that you would like to get to, and think about alternatives. You know, take a step back, try and look at the bigger picture. Develop your financial knowledge where you've made a start, you're on this talk. Identify support. So here, I mean, what sort of tools and resources are you going to use? Is it important to start with maybe doing a budget and thinking about a budget planner? Are you proficient with Excel, or could you turn to a website perhaps like Martin Lewis and the Money Saving Expert website, which has got lots of helpful tips and hints? Are you someone who might work much better by using a range of materials, you know, felt tips, colors, all of those? What can you do to make this a more enjoyable process in terms of getting on top of your finances? Commit to a plan. You know, get that noise out of your head and onto a piece of paper. Think about the steps you would like to take. And then review your progress. How are you checking that you're actually moving in the right direction? I've put accountability buddy there because I think women are very collaborative and social. And I've got a girlfriend, and the main thing we do is go for walks and ask each other about this kind of stuff and how it's going, and make each other accountable to each other. I think both of us derive a lot of strength and support from that. And then more widely, where might you get support from? So a financial coach, someone like me. There's a lot of momentum within the financial coach space at the moment. I think that sole practitioners like me who've got credibility are preferential to those bigger organizations like Octopus Money Coach, you know, the big corporates who are moving into this space. But take a look, reach out to me if you want some guidance or some navigation. I've put there just a summary of financial coaching. I think it's useful to remember that a financial coach is not an independent financial advisor, that distinction. So as a coach, I help you understand your relationship with money in order to empower you to take control of your finances. Whereas an IFA will listen to your needs and explore your financial goals before identifying the financial products which might help you get to where you want to get to. And then underneath, I've just listed a couple of perhaps useful ideas about other support. If you're worried about debt, there are lots of debt organisations who perhaps you could talk to, including Step Change. An accountant, lots of freelancers and self-employed people probably have an accountant. And A lot of people I talk to have inherited accountants from a brother's friend or something a bit loose. If your accountant isn't servicing you in a way which is a good relationship, then maybe it's time to think about changing your accountant and looking out for one who you feel you could work with a lot better. I think accountants are important, but so many people I come across feel that they have no relationship with their accountant and yet are paying big fees to these people. So think about the quality of that accountant relationship and whether it's actually working for you. Internet sites, I go on Money Saving Expert a lot. There are others which are really useful. Banking tools and apps, there are lots of new banks who are digital and encourage you to separate your money into different pots and perhaps are much better than the old-fashioned banks that we know of old, and maybe have a look around at those sorts of banks if other people are talking about them. Could be helpful, could offer something different. Books, podcasts, newspapers, I've put Vestpod. Emily Bellet is doing a fantastic job at Vestpod, encouraging women to get on top of finance and investments and things like that. Really worth looking up. And then, of course, your family and friends as support potentially as well. I came across this quote not so long ago. I don't know if you've come across Brianna West. But I thought this is sort of useful in the context of what we're talking about, and money potentially feeling like a mountain, which is one day the mountain that is in front of you will be so far behind you, it will barely be visible in the distance. But the person you become in learning to get over it, that will stay with you forever. And that is the point of the mountain. Any work you do on your financial self will stand you in good stead and hopefully will take you to a better place. And it's you investing in yourself, which is super important. Okay, so just coming to a close now, my conclusions. It's important to work on your money mindset and move forwards. I want you to think about informing and educating yourself and recognizing where you need support and then finding that support. I think it's really important to start breaking down the taboo of money. They say, don't they, money and sex are the last two remaining taboos. Let's talk about money, let's share stories with each other and let's support each other. And, you know, big shout out to Noon for arranging this event, because here we are, a bunch of fabulous women talking about money and breaking down those taboos. And I want you to remember that you are in control and that money is just a tool. It is not the objective. And we now know that money in itself doesn't actually make us happy. And finally, after kind of bombarding you with all this stuff, I want you to enjoy your money. We work hard and money shouldn't turn into that stick that keeps beating us up. We should enjoy our money and spend it on our family and our friends and reward ourselves for the hard work that we're doing and not just get wrapped up in money being a demon for us. You know, it's a means to an end and it's there for us to enjoy and to celebrate as well. And my last slide, Diane, is just sort of the announcement of the next date we're planning. And so I can pop that up now. We can leave it on the screen as we're talking about Q&As. Perhaps I'll do that.
Yeah, why don't you? Because I'm sure you've all found that as absolutely fascinating and eye-opening as I have. And I'd love to know what questions or comments you have, and we can share them between us and with Sasha. I have to say, I do. One of the questions that I have is around finance terminology. Yeah. So what I find to be one of the big barriers to me feeling comfortable with money is that when I'm talking about it. And I thought it was really interesting that one of the things you said is basically to reassure someone like me that I can reach out to another person for help. I don't have to sit down and work this all out by myself. But when I do talk to anyone about money, the thing that I find to be a kind of, it ramps up my anxiety is when they start using terminology that I simply don't understand. So how do you kind of navigate that?
Yeah. I think within the world of financial services, the amount of training that you go through in financial services means that you are perfectly primed to sell someone a product and to navigate the potential client through a financial conversation which you have been trained to have. And the financial advisors, and this is again a sweeping generalization, forget to actually listen to what the person in front of them is saying, because they're kind of so sucked into that schedule of what they've been taught to say and how to navigate someone through the conversation so that it results in the certain product sale at the end. And I'm not saying people do this always with a kind of malevolent intent. Quite often it's, oh, I've got the answer to this, I can help you, I know what to do. But you're so kind of pre-programmed on that path that you stop listening to what the person is saying. So as you, the client, Diane, whenever someone says something that feels like financial jargon, you've got to be confident to say, stop. I didn't understand what you just said. Please, can you try and explain that to me again? And it's not for you to feel foolish in saying that, because it is their job to be able to explain it to you. And even if you find yourself going, stop 10 times, you need to understand it. And the financial services industry is responsible for explaining it to you in a way that you can understand it. And if they're not, then they're actually falling foul of the rules of the FCA. So I know the onus is probably on you to keep saying stop, but don't feel foolish, feel confident, and challenge anyone who is talking to you in jargon to say, I just don't understand you. And if you keep using that jargon, I'm going to have to go somewhere else because this really isn't working for me.
I wonder how many other people have reached out in that way to somebody else to help with your money management, or do you do it all yourself? Perhaps you can put some comments up in the chat. It'd be interesting to know how many of the people who are a part of this session are actually doing all that money management on your own and feeling that you can do that, even if it makes you feel a bit bewildered sometimes, or whether actually what you've found as is the way that you can best manage your money is to have someone else helping you do that. Because I think, you know, for me, when I finally found an independent financial advisor who I really trusted and liked and who did speak to me in language I understood, it was genuinely revelatory. And I wouldn't say that I literally understand everything he says, but I understand absolutely plenty enough that I feel confident. Anyway, Karen has asked, as you worked in the financial services, do you feel like the banks are trying to be more inclusive and get more women empowered? Karen says she feels they've not been communicating to women until recently, and it's people like Emily from Vestpod and yourself who've been changing the system. And I don't know if anyone else needs any more explanation about what Vestpod is.
So just on that, Vestpod is set up by a fabulous woman, Emily Bellet. I think she wrote a book which was You're Not Broke, You're Pre-Rich, and she's used I think she came from a fund management background, and she's now got a community where her mission is to encourage women to manage their investments themselves. And she does a podcast, she's got a website, and I listened to her, and I attended a one-day event in London last year, which she organised. I think she's probably going to plan another one of those this year because it was so successful. I think the financial services industry has changed quite a lot since I was working in it, but there is no way I would go back to that part of the industry. And in my opinion, it hasn't moved fast enough. And there is still a lot of work to do. I think that, as you've just said, Diane, if you look harder, there are lots of people talking lots of sense now. But I think to find that within the traditional financial services industry is, you know, needle in a haystack kind of thing. It would be interesting to see what other women's experiences are. So it definitely exists. It might just need rooting out a bit further. When we went in with Eleanor to meet with Coots, it was really interesting to me that they fielded an all-female team and were very proud to tell us that the obviously Coutts is overseen by the CEO of RBS, who is Alison Rose. The girl we were talking to, Camilla, was head of private banking, and she brought in 2 or 3 other women who were relatively senior in the spheres that they were in. So it feels like change is happening, but there is still some way to go. And let's not say all men are rubbish in this, because there are some fantastic male financial advisors too. But I think, you know, if you're sitting in front of someone who's talking at you versus someone who's actually listening to you. And if it's not working for you, then go somewhere else, because there are better alternatives. And I'm sure you can find them now. It is changing for the better.
There are a couple of people asking how you find a good financial advisor, though. Is it just through recommendations, or what's the best way?
So I think word of mouth is a very good way. And of course, even word of mouth, what works for one person might not work for you. But I think just start with word of mouth and see where you end up. There's a platform called Boring Money, and
Great name.
Yeah. So Holly has set up Boring Money, and she's really down to earth and brilliant. And for people looking for top tips in investment and practical advice, Holly at Boring Money is doing a really great job as well. And she's got a platform of advisors, and you can see on their website people who've recommended them, and they've got a star rating and all of that kind of thing. So it might be worth having a look at that. It's like, how do you find a good GP, or how do you find a good specialist, isn't it? And where you feel you're being let down by the common alternative, by the main alternative, how much digging are you prepared to do? Well, I'd say it's your finances, you know, really dig deep, but there's a certain inertia, and is this good enough, and all of that kind of thing. So I'm not really giving a proficient answer, am I? But I think
no, but there's some interesting comments actually coming in on the chat, and
right.
Karen is doing a marvelous job of putting up the links too. So she's put up a link to Vestpod and a link to Boring Money. Thank you, Karen. Ange, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name right, so apologies if I'm not. Also suggests that LinkedIn can be a good place to find local finance professionals. You can build a picture of how they work from what they post and their recommendation section. So I do think though, you know, personal recommendation, having conversations with people about money is, like you say, it's such an uncomfortable subject. And I actually think it is probably really one of the last taboos, because it's just something that even with my absolute closest friends, who I feel generally not uncomfortable about talking about sex with, but I do about money.
Isn't that interesting? Wow, Diane, that's really interesting. But we're more prepared to talk about sex than money. Wow, yeah.
So these are great comments. Thank you very much, everyone. And there's quite a few people who are saying that Boring Money is great, as well as Vestpod. So do have a look at those. I'm aware we are beginning to run out of time, so I want to make sure we've got to everyone who has a comment or a question. And if we have, then I'm more than happy to wrap up. But let me know if there's Oh, I'm a chartered accountant, says Franny, and my 25-year-old daughter has also just qualified as an accountant. There are lots of female accountants now, so I think maybe more than men. And she's saying she's learnt lots from the webinar and had never really considered emotions and money before. So that's brilliant. Thank you. Excellent. Well, I hope that you all agree with Franny. I know I certainly do, that this has been such an enlightening and useful session, Sasha. Thank you so much. It really has been absolutely marvelous. And I hope you'll all go off and continue to think on the exercises that Sasha gave you early on in the session. And delighted to say that Sasha's agreed to do another session with us where she'll take us through lots and lots of practical steps and tips and hints to help you take control of your finances. And that's going to be happening on Thursday, the 2nd of March at 7 p.m, as per her slide. Look out on Noon, and we'll be promoting that as the time gets closer, and you can sign up just as you did today for free. But that one is not free. That's going to cost £10. So just be aware of that, and perhaps save your money for that. And thank you all for joining in and for being with us this evening. And of course, the biggest thank you of all to marvelous Sasha for such a fabulous session, and for making us all feel better about our money.
Good. I hope I did. Yeah. Dan, I'll just say the session that we've just done has been, I think you recognise, very kind of, if you like, theoretical and thinking about emotions and awareness and all of those sorts of ideas. So the idea for the second session is that we will actually look at budgeting, bank accounts, savings, investments, wills, pensions, insurance covers, all of that kind of thing. So a real kind of practical focus, as opposed to all the lovely awareness stuff that we were doing. So that was, we felt there was so much content, it was useful to put it into 2 sessions. So I hope you will all join the second session and get some practical tips now, focusing on the real nitty gritty.
Absolutely. And just to quickly reply to Alison, who said she was late and can we share the slides? The whole session has been recorded. Somebody with a lot more technical ability than me will explain to me, so I can let you all know exactly how you can watch it after we've finished. So yes, don't worry. You can see the whole session from start to finish, Alison. So I hope that helps. Yeah, pick up on the recording as well, Heidi. Yes, please do. So that's it. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Have an absolutely lovely evening. And we hope to see you on Thursday, the 2nd of March for the second part of Sasha's fantastic webinar series. So thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. I'll stop sharing.